Welcome back to the Earning Freedom Podcast, the Success After Prison Podcast. I am Michael with MichaelSantos.com, back with episode number 2 of my friend, and a great inspiration to us all, isn't it? We're speaking today, the second episode, with Jimmy Hamilton, an individual who went to prison when he was, for some bad decisions he made when he was 20 years old. His judge sentenced him to life in prison. Jimmy served 30 calendar years, but despite multiple decades in prison, he always maintained a level of energy and discipline and focus and commitment to reconciling with society. Now, in the first episode, Jimmy spoke with us about his initial adjustment, which was somewhat rocky for the first 4 or 5 years, until he had an epiphany that caused him to begin this really new transformation in his life. And I want to talk today with Jimmy a little bit about how he was able to persuade administrators to transfer him from a high-security penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, to a medium-security prison. Jimmy, I know that doesn't happen by accident, particularly for an individual who is convicted of a violent crime, a homicide, but it happened for you. Was it an accident? Were you lucky? Tell us a little bit about what happened.
No. Well, as I became more and more, geared towards positive thinking, as I became more and more responsible, people began to trust me with more and more responsibilities. Eventually, I was made the president of an association, a inmate group inside the prison, and we were given the opportunity to raise funds within the prison and donate them to charitable organizations outside the prison. And, as you can imagine, the administration was very high on this type of behavior. They got a lot of good publicity within the community. And that was what led them to giving me the management variable that got me out of the penitentiary.
Well, that's an important, I think, that bears a little bit more elaboration. And the reason that I say that is because many of the people who are listening to the Earning Freedom Podcast or the Success After Prison program, they're individuals who are currently right now sitting in those same types of chairs that you and I sat in for decades. They're inside of a prison. They may be living without hope. They may believe that regardless of how hard they work, nobody's noticing, nothing's changed. And my message to those individuals is to figure out a way to sustain a high level of commitment toward becoming better, understanding that, as one of our previous guests on the Earning Freedom program spoke about, he said it's 10 miles in, 10 miles out. Look, you don't automatically just fall into these problems in the criminal justice system. Likewise, it's not so easy to get out. It takes a long time. How much energy and effort did you have to make, Jimmy, before the lieutenants, the captain, the counselors, the case managers, the unit managers, the warden, all these people were willing to say, this guy's worthy of my attention, worthy of my consideration, and I want to give him a shot. How long was that process for you?
It took years, Michael. It took years for me to foster that kind of support and belief in the staff around me. But as you said, it was incremental. It was, first it was my counselor who gave me a chance, or the superintendent of education who gave me a chance to speak in front of a community group. And then,
wait a minute. Before he chose, it was actually before that, Jimmy, because your counselor gave you an opportunity. I wouldn't even say he gave you an opportunity to speak. You earned that opportunity by choosing the people you were going to associate with, by actively looking for programs in which you could participate, by enrolling in school, by
definitely
work on time. I mean, it's all those incremental steps that happened long before your counselor said, I trust Jimmy. I'm going to put him on the line here.
Definitely. Those happen, but those are day-to-day decisions. And, one of the things, as you like to say, on this program, we like to keep it authentic. I know that constantly in prison, every day you have, there's some point in the day where you feel like saying, you know what, F it. Just, I want to lay down. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to put this effort in. And I had those days. And the question that I always found myself asking, the one question that motivated me was, I asked myself, how much of tomorrow are you willing to sacrifice so that you can lay down today? Because that's what you're doing. Every day that you work, it's not the effort that you put in today for today. you plant seeds for tomorrow. And the more seeds you plant, the more plants grow, the more you can harvest. You can't expect these things to just pop up overnight. You have to continue to work and continue to believe that your efforts are going to sow rewards in the future. And another thing that I would like to put forward, another emphasis that I would like to remember that you're not doing this for other people. You're doing this. This is about you. This is about what type of individual do you want to be at the end of the day. Because as you and I have said before, listen, if you want to be a shot caller, that's fine. Go ahead. Make those decisions and be a shot caller. But understand what that future holds for you. Look around at the people who have made that decision before you and understand the hand that you're dealing yourself. Because you deal those cards every day. If you want to be a positive person, if you look at Michael Santos or you look at Jimmy Hamilton or you look at the other guys who have made it and you want that for yourself, if you want a productive life, then you have to make those choices and understand what that takes every day to do. And I think it's, go ahead.
That's what I was going to say. And that's why I really am so privileged to feature and profile people like Jimmy on this show, because individuals need to learn from you. It is impossible to listen to an individual who served 30 years, beginning in high security penitentiaries, was successful in educating himself, successful in rejecting the criminal lifestyle, successful in walking a path toward redemption. He is the one that's giving this message. It's not a guidance counselor. It's not a probation officer. It's not a case manager. It's an individual who began serving a life sentence inside of a high security penitentiary, and he successfully persuaded staff members that he needs to, that he would be better served in an institution without as much volatility. Now tell us, Jimmy, a little bit about what it was like once you got the news that you were going to be leaving United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, a high security penitentiary, and transitioning to what we eventually came to call the Dream McKean, but it was just a
dream
security prison. Tell us a little bit about that, when you learned about it and what you experienced as you transitioned out of a penitentiary into a medium security prison.
Well, when I had heard about McKean, as I'm sure you did, and I was very excited to get there. And I'll never forget the first day that I got there. We were all shackled, and we got into receiving R&D, as everybody knows.
But how was it when you first heard, when your case manager or your unit manager or the warden told you, I'm sending you out of the penitentiary?
Oh, when I was still in the penitentiary, I was incredibly excited. And you know what? The one thing that I remember was there were guys who were mad at me. There were other individuals who were bitter because I was getting out. They called me names. They wanted to talk about how I was schmoozing and brown. You're just leaving because you were a brown noser. And I couldn't believe the amount of vitriol that I was receiving, because I was progressing. I was getting out of that environment. I was escaping, and they were mad. They were mad about me leaving. I couldn't, and that was one of the things another one of those things that you just open your eyes and realize that the world you're leaving behind is not a healthy. Those people don't care about you for real.
In one of the previous episodes, I spoke about this syndrome that I heard from some of the guys I used to teach that came out of the inner city, and they call it the crabs in the bucket syndrome.
Yes.
You may remember Wayne Davis. He was a friend of ours from Harlem that was with us in McKean, and he is one of the ones who told me that. So he said, what happens when you're in this kind of environment? He said, it's like crabs in the bucket. There might be one climbing up the wall, and rather than helping him, all the other crabs in the bucket are going to pull him back down. It's not that they want to succeed. They just want everybody else around them to fail. You had the strength and the courage and the confidence to reject that lifestyle. You were successful in earning your way out of the penitentiary into a medium security prison. And I know that's a big deal. A lot of our listeners may or may not know how significant that was. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was like to transition into medium security after leaving 7 years of high security penitentiary behind you?
Well, you have to understand that going to a medium security penitentiary always means more opportunity. And that's, you always want to progress to a more fertile ground. You want to get to that spot where you can plant more seeds and grow more. And, you know, it's like the analogy of the fish in the tank. You know, a fish will only grow to the size of its tank. And as you move down in the system, your tank gets bigger and bigger, and you can grow more and more. And so going to a medium security penitentiary meant just, you know, the fact that you had more opportunities, and people, the lower you get in the system, you'll find more positive people. You know, the positive people begin to be a real force in the environment around you, not just individuals that are, you know, finding each other in you know, in a maximum security penitentiary. Now you have organizations, you have mentorship organizations, you have educational groups, you have, you know, chess clubs and you know, Shakespeare readings and things like this, where you can come together with like-minded people and learn new things and grow more. So transitioning to a medium security institution was a very big step.
What were some of the achievements that you were able to pursue, or the goals you were able to pursue while you were inside of a medium security federal correctional institution?
Well, that's where I first started to really grab on to my higher levels of secondary education. That's where I finished my college degree. I was able to graduate from the University of Pittsburgh while I was at McKean. I began to learn Spanish, and now I'm fluent in Spanish. I speak 2 languages. You know, these things. But not only that, at McKean, I was able to foster more of a sense of community with the people around me. As you know, that's when we started the Mentors organization, where guys reached out to other inmates who were doing time. You know, that to me was a big step, where I actually took a little bit more responsibility for the guys, not only for myself, but for the guys that were around me. You know, as you begin to grow, you begin to see the interrelationship that you have with the people around you. And so you want to foster that interrelationship and make it stronger, because that serves, you know, that's better for you in the long run. And that's where I became aware of that.
You know, one of the messages I try to convey through both Earning Freedom and Success After Prison is that we need to look at our environment when we're going through struggle and difficulty on a continuum. Now, on that continuum, there's going to be 15% on the left side of that continuum that those people may lack the mental capacity to be able to do what Jimmy has done and reject the criminal lifestyle and influence those people around them. There's going to be 15% on the right side, the other side of the continuum, that may have such an entrenched sense of negativity and a lack of remorse that they don't want to change. But there are 70% of the people in the middle of that continuum, and they can go either way. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be one of those people in that 70% group that can effectively transform your life to become really successful, to become measured and judged by the way you responded to problems? Or are you going to be one of those people that just keep cycling into repeatable failures and difficulties and challenges, continuing to disappoint your family, continuing to separate yourself from society? My message and our message through all of this content is to inspire you to become more like Jimmy Hamilton, more like an individual who does not only find the strength to develop himself, but also fosters or also develops the commitment to want to help those people around him through mentoring programs and through counseling and guidance, and most importantly, through his own behavior. That's certainly what you've done, Jimmy. Now, could you tell our audience a little bit, Jimmy, about how you and I met? Let's have a little recap.
Oh.
We met decades ago in prison,
Yeah.
and I'd like you to tell our audience how it was that we met, and then I will speak a little bit about from my perspective.
Okay. Well, we met through Bruce McPherson, and if you remember correctly, Bruce actually came to the prison and met with some of us before you had arrived. You hadn't been transferred yet. You hadn't arrived there yet. And Bruce McPherson was probably one of the most positive influences on my life that I've ever met. He was a man that was the first one to show me what could happen when someone not only sees you as a responsible and an honest individual, but steps out and really shows you what it means to care about people. but we met through him, and he was an incredible individual, and I think you were instrumental in actually getting him to come to McKean, because you wanted to come to McKean and you wanted him to come and see what type of people there were in McKean.
Well, tell them a little bit about who Bruce is, and then I will talk about that, because I think it's an important subject. So go ahead, tell us who is Bruce. Who Bruce was.
Bruce McPherson was he was a professor of education in Chicago, and his wife Carolyn was also a teacher. She was a science teacher at a small Catholic high school, I believe. And when they retired, they wanted to find something or some way to give back, some way to improve their community around them. And I think it's interesting that to note that even the people who are living positive lives and who are already established were still in the effort of bettering the connection around them, bettering the people around them. That was still a goal in their life after even that stage, that they wanted to make things better. And they heard about people being incarcerated, and they reached out to those of us in prison who were involved in higher education and came directly into the prison to meet us on a one-on-one basis. It was incredible.
So I will elaborate a little bit, because Bruce McPherson, Dr. Bruce McPherson, was my first mentor that came to visit me in person. I would say my first mentor was probably Socrates, and then Nelson Mandela, people I never met, but I read about when I was at the earliest stages of my journey. I describe all of that in this book right here, Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-Year Sentence, where how important it is to bring mentors into our life. And we can find those mentors through the books we read, through programs like this where we're meeting Jimmy Hamilton. In fact, you who are listening to this program or watching this video may never have an opportunity to meet Jimmy Hamilton, but I want you to think of him as a mentor, as a role model, as an individual who is the embodiment of facing struggle and then passing through it with his dignity intact, always striving to contribute. Now, when I met Bruce, we began with a correspondence, and he became a very close mentor of mine for the first 5 years or so of my imprisonment, maybe 6 years of my imprisonment. And there did come a time when I wanted to transition out of the penitentiary into a medium security prison. And like Jimmy said, before I was looking for where's going to be the best place for me to go to prison to continue my sentence, because I was, like Jimmy, very much committed and immersed in educational programs, and I wanted to get to a prison that would make it the most likely for me to be able to succeed. My research suggested that it was McKean, but I wanted Bruce to go and visit different prisons and meet guys in prison, because I knew that those guys could give him the real deal about what was going on. And so, yeah, Bruce, we coordinated a plan. I'll teach a course on this, on how that worked, where we first published an article together. From that article, it was all part of a coordinated effort. First, we published an article. Then Bruce took that article and took it to Washington, D.C. to meet with Sylvia McCollum, who at the time was the Director of Education for the Bureau of Prisons. She then allowed Bruce carte blanche to visit any federal prison and meet with serious students. That effort led to Bruce connecting with Celia Bartow at the time, Supervisor of Education at McKean. She connected him to Jimmy Hamilton. Jimmy Hamilton and his other friends at McKean convinced or persuaded Bruce that this is the place for me to go. And then I continued efforts to transition from USP Atlanta to FCI McKean, where Jimmy and I began our friendship. The reason that I wanted to point that out is because, as Jimmy described in the first episode, it's these little incremental action steps that take us from where we are to where we want to go. And had I not taken the initial action step, a person of Bruce's caliber would never have believed in me. If Jimmy hadn't taken those incremental action steps, he never would have gotten taken out of Lewisburg to Terre Haute to a medium security correctional institution, met a great mentor, and really advanced his own process of education on the educational journey. That's what I want you to be thinking, regardless of where you are right now, regardless of what bad decisions you may have made in the past or what conditions you're currently experiencing. Now is the time to begin sowing seeds so that you can have a successful outcome on the other side of that journey. That's the unified message that Jimmy and I are trying to deliver. It's the message that everybody delivers through this coursework. But the reason I wanted Jimmy to speak about it is I wanted you to hear from somebody who has actually done it, somebody who has actually gone through 30 years in prison with a high level of discipline, that you can look at Jimmy, anybody can look at him, and they would never think that he served a day in prison. But the reality is he was just released from prison after 30 calendar years, less than a month and a half ago. Now, Jimmy, I know that you'd mentioned that you'd gone through and earned your undergraduate degree from the University of Pittsburgh. I was taken out of McKean after a couple of years. I'd like you to tell our audience about what activities carried you through after you and I parted ways and we got separated to different institutions.
Well, after you left McKean, I went and signed up for the residential drug treatment program. Because, you know, I knew that I still had residual problems. And, you know, the one thing that I would also like to stress to guys out there is don't think that just because you dedicate yourself to getting better, that all of your problems suddenly disappear. You know, working through these things, working through the barriers that held us back, oftentimes, you know, that takes the help of other people. It takes structured programs, and you need some of these things. It might be religious, it might be counseling, it might be psychological. You know, there comes a point where you need people to help you along in your journey, and you can't be afraid to ask for that help. I signed up for the residential drug treatment program, the 500-hour drug treatment program. And I know a lot of times in the system, in the federal system especially, that program catches a lot of flack. But the programs are only what you make them out to be. If you're willing to take it seriously and to address your own needs, then the programs that are there, they can help you and they can work. And it worked for me. I went through the 500-hour drug treatment program after you left. When I did that, it lowered my security level again, and I got to transfer to a low security prison. They sent me to the Federal Medical Center in Lexington as a general population inmate in 1998.
So here's an individual convicted of first-degree murder, serving a life sentence, begins his term inside of a United States penitentiary in Terre Haute, a high-security penitentiary. He is living in an environment that is riddled with violence, riddled with gang activity, riddled with negativity, but somehow he finds the power within to transform his thought process and to develop a new set of values and start pursuing a pattern of behavior reflecting his commitment to reconciling with society. As a consequence of that, the authorities recognize his change and transfer him from a high security penitentiary to a medium security correctional institution. While there, Jimmy not only completes his undergraduate degree, but he also completes the residential drug abuse program, not because he wants an extra bowl of Wheaties, not because he wants a lower bunk pass, but simply because he wants to become a better human being. And as a consequence of that behavior, he transitions from a medium to a low. Jimmy, for those in our audience who are still inside of a high security penitentiary, walk them through how the stress level changes from a high to a medium to a low.
Oh, it's not even comparable under any stretch. The low security institutions, if you're in a high security institution right now, you might even have a difficulty imagining the amount of stress, you know, because you live with it on a day-to-day basis, and you don't understand how much of it you carry around. You don't understand that, you know, you're looking over your shoulder all the time, and you feel it, you live with it. And then when you get to these lower institutions, that stress level disappears. A lot of that, a lot of the tension is gone. In Lexington, there were no locked doors. There were no, I didn't ever have to carry a weapon in Lexington. I didn't ever have to, worry about anybody robbing my locker or anything like of that nature. And there was a lot less stress in Lexington.
It's a funny thing. When I transitioned from a penitentiary to a medium, I felt like I was getting released. I mean, it was such an awesome feeling of liberty, just leaving that high, intense, stressful, violent atmosphere and going to a medium. It really felt as if it opened up. And then when I went from a medium to a low, it was equally that same level of stress again popped off of me. And if you have an opportunity to go to a minimum security camp, you feel it coming off of you once again. But what's really important to recognize is it's the behavior that you make while you're inside the difficult environments that determine whether you're a good candidate to be moving out. Now, the sad thing is, and this is what I experienced, Jimmy, I'd like to hear if you had a different perspective, is when I went to the medium and when I went to the low, I'd encounter a lot of people who'd never been in higher security, and they would say that they wanted to get to a USP because they believed they could get more respect. What did you find in that environment?
I heard that so many times. That's comical because listen, I've always told those guys, listen, you're only one slap from a penitentiary. You can go ahead and smack anybody you want, and you can go to the penitentiary. A lot of times as convicted felons, when we're in the system, we feel like we have this persona that we have to live up to. We have to be, the convict code, and oh, I'm a real convict, and and those are just roles that for some reason guys want to take on to themselves, and it means nothing. There's no beneficial outcome to those roles. We just, for some reason people want to put those personas on because they're afraid to let people see who they really are, or they're afraid to express themselves as they really feel. So everybody's got to be a convict. And that was such a joke. It almost got to be comical in the end because, why would you want to go from a place where, your doors are always open and there's a great deal of freedom and you're never locked down? Why would you want to go to a place where you're locked down and there's gang activity and people are carrying knives? I mean, that's just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense to even think that.
Jimmy, you just brought up a great term, the term convict. I want to address that term because there's a lot of people who believe that that's the reputation they want to build. Now, the reality is what you need to be striving to build is to be a great human being, a great citizen.
Definitely.
There's a fundamental difference between the perception of what a convict is and what a good citizen is. You see, in prison, there is this misconception about respect. Everybody wants to get respect in prison, but respect in prison is fundamentally different from what respect means out here in society. It all begins with this question of where are you trying to distinguish yourself? Are you trying to distinguish yourself in the population of felons, or do you want to build a level of support and endorsement and respect outside in society where you can walk into a bank or walk into a job and have people shake your hand, look you in the eye, and welcome you here? You see, respect in prison is all too often confused with fear. People in prison, they want other people to fear them. But respect is generally defined by the types of virtues that Jimmy is speaking about. A commitment to education, a commitment to contributing to society, a commitment to building something better, a commitment to striving to prove worthy of his grandmother's love, a commitment to self-reflection. This is what we want you to be thinking about because this is the lesson that we learned from masterminds. That's what we learned from Nelson Mandela. An individual who is wrongfully incarcerated, not because of a crime he committed, but simply because of the injustice of his country. And yet, rather than having any anger or bitterness after 27 years in prison, he came back to society wanting to contribute, wanting to build a better society for everybody. And that's the hallmark of a leader. That's what's deserving of our respect, not whether an individual is prepared to use lethal violence because somebody stayed on the phone too long, or somebody sat in the wrong chair in the movie room, or somebody mistakenly turned the channel. You know,
I'd like to say this too, Michael.
I want to hear it.
Even inside the prison, if you look at the fundamentals that underlie just the concept of being a convict, everything about it is negative. There are no positive outcomes to that life. There's no benefits to living that life. People say, oh, as you said, people respect me. No, people don't really respect you. The staff doesn't respect you. Your family doesn't really respect you. You're in prison. You're not contributing to society in any meaningful fashion. To be a convict is to be a failure. And I just wish that I could, get rid of that. And here's the thing that I always found funny is people were always quick to say, oh, that's not part of the convict code. But I always noticed that they always said that about what other people were doing. People were quick to throw that out when they were talking about somebody else. But whenever they were talking about their own lives, they weren't, they never wanted to bring that back on themselves. That whole trip about a convict code, that's just a trap. And it's a bad trap. And if you get caught in it, it's a dead end trap. Like we pointed out in our first talk, just look around at the people who are buying into the convict code and ask yourself, is that where you want to be in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? We always had a joke. You know how in prison people say, oh, I'm trying to go hard. I'm going to go hard. Well, you know what? They got a place for you. You can go hard. And you can go as hard as you want to go. And eventually you're going to get to a place where there's nowhere left to go.
But that is absolutely correct. But if you want to get yourself out of that environment, get yourself into a better environment, and more importantly, position yourself to come back to society strong, you need to be learning from masterminds. That's what we have here on the show today. The mastermind is Jimmy Hamilton, an individual who went to prison when he was 20, served 30 calendar years, came back to society, and you can see him. You don't have to take my word for it. If you're watching this video at michaelsantos.com, you will see that Jimmy, nobody would think that he served a day in prison. And yet he is going back in through these videos, through these podcasts. Why? To inspire more people to become more successful citizens. That's what we're about. We will have episode 3 momentarily. I'm going to close out this audio and video podcast, and we will start another one. So Jimmy, thank you again for spending this time with us. We'll be right back. If you want to see show notes, visit michaelsantos.com, and I will provide links back to Jimmy's contact information. Thanks again. Back soon on Earning Freedom Podcast and Success After Prison Podcast. Awesome.